Starfield was obviously designed from the beginning to be a game with a very long shelf life. Bethesda see how much time is spent in Fallout and Skyrim, and they know how important those games are to players. So it's not surprising that they would want to accommodate a loyal fanbase like that for Starfield as well. They have always made games that people want to play for hundreds of hours. But with Starfield, it feels like they really wanted to build a foundation that would last a long way into the future. Aside from a few obvious design decisions made to allow this, it also seems to me like Bethesda are treating the game as more of a platform or live service product than any of their previous single-player releases, for better or worse. Basically, I think that Bethesda's approach can be broken up into a three-part strategy, which aims to keep Starfield relevant for as long as possible, or at the very least until The Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. Firstly, there's the regular updates. Secondly, the DLC expansions. And third, mods and the Creation Club. While I'll leave the discussion of DLC for another time, I do think that updates and mods are inherently tied together in this conversation about how Starfield is going to evolve. Before I discuss how they're tied together though, and the larger implications for the future of Starfield itself, it's worth briefly considering the latest update in Isolation, and the new mission statement that it seems to offer for Bethesda's updates going forward.
You thinking about checking out that new restaurant over by the embassy?
I don't know about that.
Though Starfield was hardly bug-free when it first released, it certainly was remarkably polished, at least for a Bethesda game. With relatively few game-breaking glitches to fix then, we've also received very few substantial updates since launch. And it's clear now that that's because the developers had turned their attention toward bigger things. Starfield's May update did deliver several bug fixes, but far more exciting for most, it also introduced a host of new features and gameplay improvements. And while these changes are exciting in and of themselves, I'm even more excited about what I think it means for the future of the game. I'm forced to admit here, even as someone who didn't particularly want new maps in the game, that these new maps are fantastic. Easily my favourite city maps in a Bethesda game, since I've usually found their maps pretty frustrating to navigate. And the fact that they've built this whole new system which makes every planet surface map look better, including featuring your actual ship there, it's just a win all round. I'm sure there are some quirks, but I've yet to encounter any personally. The option for 60, 40 or uncapped frame rate on Xbox Series X is also amazing. I was not honestly expecting they would be able to add this anytime soon, given the way they previously talked about frame rate. Admittedly, the fact that they were able to deliver these modes at all makes me wonder why they couldn't have had them at launch. It certainly seems like performance in New Atlantis and Aquila City was always the problem, and they went for 30 frames per second mostly because it was consistent and likely to be reviewed the best. But anyway, I'm just glad these modes are here now, and they're likely to make the game more playable for a lot of people. The new gameplay options are fantastic as well. Things like being able to increase your carry weight can make the game so much less frustrating, and I love how they adjust XP earned based on how hard or easy you're making things for yourself. These options are definitely worth adjusting at the start of any game to allow you to play the way you want to play. But I also think it's great that you can adjust them as you go along. And then there are several smaller but still great new additions. Being able to respec traits and redesign your character in New Game Plus is an obvious win, making New Game Plus a lot more appealing for many. And customizing your ship interior is another thing I wasn't even sure we'd ever end up getting, but I'm so glad we did. There are also some subtle menu changes with filters to help navigate them, but to be frank, I still think there's a lot of room for improvement in the menus. And then, probably my favourite new change, is being able to toggle off the dialogue camera. I'm really glad for this change because I regularly found the dialogue camera frustrating in the game. And this feels a lot more immersive. That said, having played a bit this way, I do understand why that dialogue camera was there from the start. Mostly, as I suspected, it allows them to dynamically reset or insert new lighting to make characters look prettier when talking, as certain lighting conditions really don't do the faces justice here. My top tip for you would be to toggle on your flashlight before entering dialogue. You can then adjust where the flashlight is pointing and it helps keep the lighting consistent. Though, as a brief aside, the default flashlight in Starfield is still not great. What I really want to see added here, which would make this nearly perfect for me, is the ability to zoom in on characters' faces while talking, like you can in Cyberpunk with the left trigger. I'd ideally like to be able to walk away from dialogue too, like I could in Fallout 4. But if that's not possible, then a better flashlight and the ability to zoom in when talking, and I'd be happy. Either way though, I'm very thankful for this new addition, and I'm hopeful based on all of these changes that there is a lot more good to come for Starfield.
Great day for some exploring, huh?
There was always talk, even before Starfield released, that the game would continue to be supported for many years post-launch. Though without any sort of roadmap, it was never really clear what was actually meant by that. Obviously, we knew to expect DLC and mod support, but it feels like the way Bethesda are handling Starfield speaks to a whole new kind of approach for them. Clearly, Fallout 76 was always going to require regular updates to support that online experience. But Bethesda's previous single-player games have never really received updates quite on this level, outside of DLC. Previously, I would have expected features like customizing your ship's interior to come in a DLC pack, similar to the workshop packs that were available for Fallout 4. I also would have expected something like land vehicles to come in a DLC, but they've talked very specifically about these vehicles separately from the expansion, and so it seems like they're going to come in a free update for everyone, and that is great. Something as game-changing as land vehicles absolutely should be in a free update and not DLC, because they have the potential to dramatically change the way a playthrough feels for everyone. Offer special vehicles and vehicle-based locations in DLCs by all means, but let everyone have access at least to the base model. I think CD Projekt Red got this very right with the way they made weaponized vehicles available to everyone, even though they seem to chiefly exist because of the Phantom Liberty expansion. So if we can assume then that land vehicles will be coming as a free update for everyone, then it bodes very well for the future of Starfield and updates to come. Things like the vehicles and the map changes we already have make me think that this time around, Bethesda are not going to be shy about changing the way the game fundamentally plays if it means a better player experience, because I think they definitely were in the past. When Fallout 4 first released, one of the most common criticisms across the board was how frustrating it was choosing from the short, simple dialogue options. Modders quickly fixed this, but I think it would have been pretty easy for Bethesda to fix this too, and it would have been a crowd-pleasing update too, given how widespread this complaint was. At the very least, they could have offered it as an option in the menus, and yet they didn't. They added a survival mode to the game, but at least as far as I remember, that was the most dramatic addition to the game through updates by far. With Starfield though, Bethesda are directly reacting to community feedback and implementing solutions, more like you'd expect from a live service product than a single player game. And that really explains it, I think. Taking what they've learned from the long lives of their previous games, and from supporting Fallout 76, they're treating Starfield a bit more like a live service game. This was probably obvious from the start, in the way the game is designed and the way they've talked about it. I've discussed the main story and the faction quests before, and I almost certainly will again, but I'll repeat briefly here that all of these quests exist essentially in isolation to avoid interfering with anything else. In this way, it certainly seems like Bethesda wanted the game's world to exist in a relatively stable state, either to give the game room to grow or to allow for better consistency across DLCs and Creation Club content, which I'll get to in a bit. Regardless, though, I'm excited for what this update hopefully means for the future of the game. The introduction of land vehicles by themselves has huge implications. It won't be long after that before we have highways on Mars or racetracks on every moon. One thing I'm personally hoping to see in an update is spacewalking implemented in some way. We've already seen that it's possible for modders to make this work, and the zero gravity mechanics are already in the game, so I really hope we eventually see Moonraker style space battles outside of space stations, or at the very least I'd like the ability to hop outside of my spaceship and fly around it. The thing I'd most like to see changed in Starfield though is a simple small update to the New Atlantis transit system, or NAT. Obviously, I would appreciate it if they could turn this into a fully functional transit system that moves throughout the city without loading screens. But that's not really what I'm asking for. If you asked me the one thing that I'd most like to see from a future Starfield update, it's actually pretty simple. Just stop the NAT from intersecting with these protrusions on the side of the track here. I am begging you, please. I understand that it's pretty normal in most games to see objects intersecting with or passing through one another. I understand, and usually I don't care. But I say this with complete sincerity as someone who noticed this when I first visited New Atlantis and has had to witness it close to 100 times since. Nothing breaks my immersion more than these little jutting out bits which intersect with the NAT. Why are they there? Who designed these bits that poke out and cut into the side of the train vehicle? If you look from the side, they seem like they shouldn't intersect, but in the cutscene bit, they absolutely do. I'm almost certain that this is the sole reason why Starfield didn't end up with a 90 or more on Metacritic. Anyway, point is that I'm excited for what else these updates could bring. And even though I love the game in its current state, I do hope that they can win people over with more of these changes. I think Starfield released in a pretty good state, but we've all come to accept these days that very few games release in a finished state. Again, for better or worse. In this case though, I do think it's for the better. There are countless things that I'm excited to see hopefully come to Starfield in the future. And of course, we can't talk about the future of Starfield without talking about modding.
Proud to be a UC Marine. Hoorah!
With proper mod support on the horizon, I hope we'll finally start to see the modding community invest some serious time into Starfield to fill out this universe with new and exciting things, experiences, and locations. I'm aware that up to this point, the Starfield modding community has been relatively small and surrounded by controversy concerning technical issues and a general lack of interest in jumping ship from Skyrim or Fallout, spurred on by divided opinions on the game itself since launch. Though I can't speak to the technical side at all, it certainly seems like Starfield should present modders with some amazing opportunities, and I hope that when the tools are released, they at least live up to expectations. And for what it's worth, I also hope that the implementation of mods on Xbox allows for larger mods and easier setup. I'd love for PC and Xbox players to have a more unified and comparable experience with Starfield. The release of modding tools will only ever be half the story though, since it's clear that when they do release, we'll also be introduced to Starfield's version of the Creation Club, or Bethesda's mod storefront as it were. And this will almost certainly stir up some controversy of its own, which is likely part of the reason why Bethesda have been so quiet on the details up till now. With its first iteration in Fallout 4, the Creation Club was fairly small in scale and always felt like it was really just Bethesda dipping their toes in the water. But it's clear that they are now all in on making it work across the Elder Scrolls, Fallout and Starfield. It's also more than likely that they're doing so, at least in part because of some gentle nudging from their Microsoft overlords to make more money. Like many of you, I'm sure, I'm a little bit split on how I feel about Creation Club and what it means for all of these games. I really commend Bethesda for trying to build a system which supports their loyal modders and helps them make a career out of doing what they love. And I think that people getting paid to make these mods, in theory, is only going to increase the quality, if not quantity, of mods we get in Starfield. But I also feel like the Creation Club necessarily creates a series of rifts in the community over who chooses or is able to make mods for Creation Club and who makes them for free, over which mods are worth real cash to people and which aren't, and over who can even justify buying these Creation Club mods in the first place. Whereas previously you could be basically certain that anyone who wanted to try a mod and had a PC could easily pick it up, you're potentially really shrinking your audience here by selling them instead. And it's likely to create a situation where only a few of these mods are popular or talked about, because basically no one can possibly have them all. I hope at the very least that prices feel reasonable, but I know I've personally never picked up any Creation Club content because it's just never felt worth it to me. I doubt the pricing will feel any different this time around, but we'll see. My hope is that Creation Club will mostly offer either well-priced, unique cosmetics like funky spacesuits or weapon skins, or mini expansions offering special weapons, short quest lines, or unique locations on any of the 1,000 planets in the game. It's worth mentioning that not having a voiced protagonist makes it necessarily easier for modders to record new dialogue for these mini expansions, allowing them to fit in well with the base game stuff. And I hope we do see some of that, because that would certainly be the stuff I would see the most value in. What I hope we don't see in Creation Club is content which feels like it should have come in the form of a free update. I really mainly don't want anything that will create a dramatic divide between the player base that has it and the player base that doesn't. It's a tough conversation though, because I do want to see exciting new stuff that I'd be willing to pay for. And modders have every right to sell and make money from content or features that they've worked hard on. I just desperately don't want to end up in a situation where the community feels divided over this content. So I hope we get the right balance of all of these elements. When Creation Club launches, with content produced by several experienced modders who've had early access to the tools, it will be interesting to see how Starfield players respond and what kind of content is even made available. In the worst possible scenario, we'll end up with all new features and quality of life improvements locked behind either DLC or the Creation Club. But I don't think that's actually what Bethesda wants. I hope that we continue getting great new updates like this latest one from Bethesda, as well as new and exciting DLC expansions. And on top of that, I'd like to see a thriving community of modders, while Creation Club serves as the place for polished, expansive, and unique new content at reasonable prices. We'll just have to see how things turn out though. The optimist in me wanted to believe when Microsoft first bought Bethesda that they would have the good sense to allow Bethesda Game Studios and all of their other developers to work to their strengths on the games they wanted to work on, without necessitating any microtransaction heavy live service nonsense. I think we're sort of past optimism with this stuff now though, because unfortunately, just like when ZeniMax was independent, Bethesda are still beholden to shareholders demanding increased growth and better margins. Creation Club can support modders, but it will also make sure that Bethesda continues to earn enough that it keeps Microsoft happy. And so, if that's what it takes to allow them to continue making these huge single-player games, which I love, then that's alright with me. I just really hope they also feel incentivized to work on several more expansions for Starfield 2. Either way though, I'm very hopeful about Bethesda's vision for Starfield's future, and I think that if they listen to their community and get the balance right between DLC, updates, and Creation Club content, then Starfield should only get bigger and better over the next few years. How do you feel about Starfield after this latest update though? And what do you hope comes in future updates, DLC, or Creation Club content? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to hear me talk about more video game stuff. Otherwise, I'll see you next time around.